So I'm going to start us off. Thank you again for joining us today for our webinar on helping young English learners at home, simple and fun activities to strengthen language development. We are really glad you're here. We've been so looking forward to this. This webinar is a collaboration among the Regional Educational Laboratories, or RELs, West, Northeast and Islands, and Northwest. It grew out of a broader cross-REL effort to provide support and resources for educators and families during the pandemic. And there were several initiatives going on, but this is one that we really enjoyed working on. So we're going to begin the webinar by giving a short overview of the Works Clearinghouse Practice Guide, Teaching Academic Content and Literacy to English Learners in Elementary and Middle School, published in 2014 by IES. And then we'll move on to the Family and Caregiver Activity Sheets, or FCAs for short, that we developed based on the practice guide recommendations. We'll also review the Educator guide we developed to assist educators in working with families in the FCAs. And in this section, I'm really excited for you to see some of the video clips of families using the activities. It's so fun. We'll end with your questions, which we ask you to post in the chat during the webinar, and we'll also include REL contact information. And we can move on to the next slide. So we hope that you'll enjoy this presentation and we'll come away with knowledge. Oops, maybe I skipped one. We'll come away with knowledge on the practice guide, the FCAs and the educator guide, and how to use them with families and caregivers. Sorry about that. And now I'll turn it over to John Paul Lapid and Laurie Van Houten from REL West, starting with Laurie. Take it away, Laurie.
Hello, everybody. And I'd like to also extend my big thanks to all of you for joining the webinar. My cat has decided that this is the right time to make an appearance. So if I'm a little distracted, it's because I am shoving her out of the way. Let's see, I am with REL West, as Heidi said, and my job is I coordinate technical assistance across our 4-state region. And I am going to start with you talking about the family and caregiver activities, the FCAs, and those are all based on the Works Clearinghouse Practice Guides. So I'm going to be sharing some information about the practice guides. I'll start by just telling you that there are 24 practice guides and more on the way, and they're designed for use by educators and include topics from teaching fractions to using data to supporting English learners. There's a couple on English learners. As I mentioned, there are 24 practice guides, and each one of them has a set of research-based recommendations that have been identified by a panel of experts on that topic. And beneath each recommendation, there's also a set of practices or indicators that the experts have shown that when implemented well, can improve student outcomes. Each guide also has specific classroom examples. They've got ways of overcoming obstacles and roadblocks to implementation. They're really a useful set of resources that you should check out. The one that we're using today for the FCAs, it's based on the 2014 English Learner Practice Guide. As Heidi mentioned, it's teaching academic content and literacy to English learners in elementary and middle school. And the 4 recommendations in this guide focus on developing English language proficiency while simultaneously building their content knowledge and skills. And there are indeed 4 recommendations in this guide. Where I'm going to tell you a little bit more about 3 of the 4 of these. The 4th one, providing small group instructional intervention, is really something that's better suited to the classroom and doesn't translate well to the home. So we didn't include that in the FCAs. But you can certainly look at the guide and see if there's anything in there that you might want to use in your own classrooms. So this is recommendation 1, and now I've lost my place. Several of our FCAs feature recommendation 1. which is teaching a set of academic vocabulary. And here you see the 4 practices that are under that recommendation. And so we have several FCAs that provide instructions for families and caregivers to select an informational text and identify a small set of academic vocabulary. And then the FCAs also provide guidance for families in using a variety of strategies to write, speak, listen, in order to learn and practice these new vocabulary words and use them productively. The second recommendation we have in also several of the FCAs, making a meal together and interviewing a special person both utilize recommendation 2, which is about integrating oral and written language instruction. Steps in these and some of the other FCAs invite families to provide opportunities to use graphic organizers, to discuss and plan their writing, and try out some of their new content vocabulary as well. So you can see that those are practices that come from recommendation 2. And then finally, in recommendation 3, that one focuses very specifically on providing regular and structured opportunities for teaching writing, for developing writing skills. And we have a couple of them that of the FCAs that target that one in particular. So using a writing notebook, for example, provides structured opportunities for students to plan, discuss, and improve upon their writing as outlined in the practice guide. And I would really encourage you to check out this practice guide in particular, but all of them generally. So they are just a wealth of practical, actionable, evidence-based ideas for you to use in your work. Now I will pass the ball to my colleague, John Paul, and he's going to share a little more about why we would want to do this with families and how important this work is. So on to you, John Paul.
Thank you so much, Lori. Buenas and hafade. Hello, my name is John Paul Lapid, and I am a senior researcher with REL West at WestEd. It is a true pleasure to be with you this afternoon, as well as to hear of my brothers and sisters coming to us from Saipan in the Marianas Islands. So Zeus Maasi, and let's move forward. Along with the IES practice guides, I would like to share with you that there is a significant body of research and policy documents that emphasize the importance of taking an asset-based approach by capitalizing on students' home language, knowledge, and cultural assets when working with multilingual and English learners and their families and caregivers. This is one of the main themes guiding our conversation today. Families and caregivers have the capacity. I'm going to say that one more time. Families and caregivers have the capacity to help their children develop language regardless of their background. And during this time of distance learning, their role to support language and literacy development and serve as models of language is critical. As partners in education, we want families and caregivers to understand the importance of their day-to-day interactions and how they contribute to their child's future success in school and beyond. We want to build strong relationships with families and caregivers so we can clearly communicate and encourage daily interactions that will allow children's language and literacy development to thrive. In 2013, the United States Department of Education released Partners in Education, a dual capacity building framework for family-school partnerships. This framework identifies asset orientation as an essential condition when partnering with families, affirms that we must remember that families can do, not what they can't. The same approach we take when working with students in our classrooms. We are not trying to teach families and caregivers how to be teachers, but instead, We want to communicate that they have many cultural and linguistic assets that support their children's language and literacy development. So, as you can see on the screen, we want to leverage family, caregiver, and student assets as significant contributors to teaching and learning. We want to honor family and caregiver cultural practices and anticipate challenges and scaffold for success. So ladies and gentlemen, with that being said, I'm going to pass this over to Kelly, and Kelly is going to share with us about our FCAs. Kelly, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you, John Paul. My name is Kelly Scardina, and I'm with REL Northwest, working in equity and systems improvement for multilingual learners. So, what are the FCAs? When the pandemic struck, RELs convened to discuss ways we could help schools, districts, and families continue learning despite the disruption. Since then, RELs have developed myriad products of pandemic-related resources that Lori referred to, including FAQs on different topics, webinars, blog posts, research reports, and family and caregiver activities based on the different practice guides. We're posting in the chat a link to these resources. Thank you, Lori. Our 3 RELs collaborated on 9 FCAs, which we based on the EL practice guide, while other RELs worked on ones in math, science, and early literacy. For the EL FCAs, we wanted to acknowledge that families may not speak English at home and may not have access to the internet, and also that they may not necessarily want to or have the time to be teachers. We've all experienced some of this over the past year. This quote is from a grandfather of a young English learner whose sentiment has been our guide as we develop these activities. I just want to enjoy being with my granddaughter at home. How can I make learning fun for her? These activities that we fondly refer to as the FCAs aim to support quality time with children. We wanted something that would bring more fun into learning at home, build on activities that families already do, build on or create activities that do not require technology, that focus on younger children who may need more support during at-home learning, build language in multiple content areas and are available in Spanish and in English. So we got to work. As my colleague Lori has outlined the recommendations from the EL practice guide, these activities are grounded in the 3 recommendations that she covered. We created activities that ask and answer questions, experiences to build on and discuss to stretch language and to engage in deeper conversation, activities that scaffold more meaningful interactions with a variety of texts. We created activities that include strategies for learning new vocabulary through playing with words, opportunities to build academic vocabulary, and practicing those new words. And also those experiences that might lead to writing through things like cooking, interviewing, using writing notebooks, all of which stretch oral and written language and incorporate talking, questioning, using, and learning language in meaningful ways. The Educator's Guide is a companion to the FCAs and was designed to support those who work directly with families and caregivers and includes tips and ideas for sharing the FCAs with families. Let's take a closer look at these FCAs. You'll see here examples from 2 of the FCAs. Remember, there are 9 that have been published. I want to be sure to point out that the FCAs are in both English and Spanish with a consistent structure throughout. On page 1, you'll see an overview of the activity itself, and that's on the left. On page 2, you'll see language supports and sometimes language challenges that go along with the activities. So as families and caregivers use one of the activities, the others will become familiar and easy to use. And they really can have fun. So as I was saying, each of the 9 FCAs follows a consistent structure. At the top of the first page, you'll see a message about how children can strengthen language connected to the activity. We can strengthen language in daily activities that we already do. In the principles under Keep in Mind, we emphasize the importance of using home language or English and having fun in all of the activities. Then we highlight the rationale for the particular activity and make a direct connection to language learning. At the bottom half of each FCA on the first page, you'll find the learning goal, the targeted audience, which is adaptable, and the materials you'll need, which in this case is a shared experience along with some crayons or something to write with, I think. Then you'll find step-by-step guidance to move toward the learning goal. In this one, you'll see the steps are share, read, or create an experience, ask questions to stretch language, and draw or write to reflect on the experience. On the back, the activity supports will look different depending on the activity. In this sheet, you'll see suggestions for types of experiences in and out of the home to talk about with your child. For example, some of the great ideas that you all had, playing a game, helping around the house, like doing laundry, or observing bugs. Next comes additional supports. These also vary depending on the activity sheet. All of them contain ideas for stretching language. This one provides specific supports for deepening conversations about the experience. What did you notice? Tell me why you think that. Sometimes we have included a language challenge. In this activity, we encourage the child to switch roles and ask the adult the questions about an experience. Again, the options are many, and we're finding that families are being creative and bringing their own unique twist to all of these activities. Now, John Paul will take us through the educator's guide that accompanies the activities we created.
Thank you so much, Kelly, spending the time with us sharing about the FCA sheets. Now that you know about the FCA sheets, I would like to share with you the educator's guide that was created for you to use with families and caregivers. This guide is a companion to the FCAs, and it is for all educators working with multilingual and English learner students and their families and/or caregivers. The guide consists of a summary of the research and recommendations. It has general tips for making the most of the FCAs and an overview of how the activities help scaffold language and literacy development across the content areas, as well as supports and strategies to connect with families and caregivers to help them make the most of each of the activities. Our team spent the time creating a resource that all educators can pick up and use with families and caregivers. As you can see on the screen, the educator's guide consists of general tips for making the most of the FCAs, preparing the activity sheets, disseminating the activity sheets, supporting families and caregivers using the activity sheets, following up activities for families and caregivers, and we also provided language-based supports differentiated by grade levels and language levels to meet the needs of our students. Now that I've shared with you the educator's guide, I would like to bring back Kelly, and Kelly's going to share with you what you really wanted during this webinar: how to use the FCAs in the field with our families and caregivers. Kelly.
Thank you, John Paul. Yeah, so now we get to the fun part. Let's look at how one family has put these into practice. Afterwards, we'll hear about how it went. This family chose to make a meal together. As you'll see, there are several steps to this activity. Let's take a look.
Pensar en qué podemos usar la cocina y así preparar las cosas que vamos a necesitar y familiarizarte con el vocabulario que se necesita en la cocina para poder cocinar correctamente. Por ejemplo, ¿qué le gustaría que hiciéramos para la cena, para el almuerzo, para el desayuno?
¿Podemos hacer huevos estrellados?
Sí, se pueden hacer. ¿Y tú?
Yo sé, huevos rancheros.
Huevos rancheros, es una buena idea. Son los materiales que vamos a usar.
Los huevos, aceite, tomate, cebolla y la tabla. Y un cuchillo.
Y un cuchillo. Y
Y una
también...
espátula.
También.
Y las cacerolas.
Ujú.
Okay. ¡Mami!
1, 2 y 3.
¡Wow!
Amaya, ¿qué cocinamos ayer
Cocinamos
para el desayuno?
un huevo estrellado.
Oh, ¿y qué utensilios se necesitan?
Usamos un plato, una cacerola, un cuchillo y una espátula.
¿Y los ingredientes que lleva?
Sal, pimienta, huevo y aceite.
Oh, qué bien.
Bueno, ahorita estoy dibujando el huevo. Aquí está la cacerola, aquí está el huevo, aquí está
Espérame,
sal,
mamá.
aquí está la pimienta, aquí está la
Pepimienta no es pimienta.
Fíjate que te voy a corregir una cosita. No se dice pepimienta, se dice pimienta.
pimienta.
Pimienta. Es que tenés la palabra en inglés pepper, no, pimienta.
Ok,
¿Cómo se...? Dime, ¿dónde está la pimienta? ¿Cuál es?
aquí.
Sí, y a la par de la pimienta, ¿qué hay?
Sal,
Muy bien. ¿Y qué te queda hacer otro ingrediente que falta?
el aceite y el huevo.
Muy bien, gracias.
All right, so thank you to the family that helped us pilot these activities and gave us some really clear understandings about how they would work when we tried them in action. So how did we do? Did we accomplish our goals? Did they bring more fun into learning at home? It seems like so. Did they build on an activity that families already do? Did you see any technology? And did they build language? So we feel pretty great about seeing these in action. You all know as educators, you create your plans and then you see them in action, and it always feels good when it works out well. As we've been saying, there are many ways to use these activities based on the strengths and interests of the families themselves. Let's listen to Doña Gladys as she shares her experience using a few of the FCAs with her granddaughters.
Para mí es mucho más fácil ayudarlas en español porque yo tengo la facilidad de hablarles sobre mi cultura, sobre las cosas que a mí me dieron cuando yo era pequeña y las entiendo más, nos podemos relacionar más porque ellas hablan también el español y yo también. En cambio, cuando lo hago en inglés es un poco más difícil porque mi inglés no es suficiente como para explicarles todo lo que yo quiero explicarles culturalmente. Es una canción y dice, estoy un poquito ronca, pero no importa. Érase una viejecita sin nadita que comer, sino carne, fruta, dulces, tortas, huevos, pan y té.
Usted me la ha contado
¿Verdad?
antes.
Que ya lo identificaste. Yo te la he cantado muchas veces a las dos ustedes. Cántamela tú, vamos a ver si la puedes. Es importante porque sí tengo más conexión, más oportunidad de que ellas entiendan todo y más oportunidad de darles mis ideas y mis conocimientos y la cultura que va envuelta en esto.
¿Cuándo lo puede hacer en español?
Cuando lo puedo hacer en español. En English is a little bit different because my language is not enough, I think. It's not enough, so I try hard to say anything I would like to, and sometimes when I don't find a word, they help me to do it. Además, estas actividades son mucho más interesantes para mí y para ellas porque las puedo ayudar mejor y además no tienen ellas la presión. Cuando ellas me están haciendo las tareas en inglés, yo muy poco les puedo ayudar, pero en español sí aprenden gramática en una forma bien simple, como lo hicimos con el poema, por ejemplo, el idioma, las palabras, la gramática especialmente, fue puesta en un poema. Entonces eso es mucho más fácil para ellas y para mí.
You saw Doña Gladys use an activity called, with her granddaughter, called Questions About Stories, and I believe that Lori put that in the chat. Thank you. So Doña Gladys shared some about her challenges in working with her granddaughters in English, even though she seems to know a lot of English. Her assets are clearly many, but her knowledge of her culture, her rich experiences, and her broad and deep language abilities in Spanish are some of her greatest strengths. Did you notice in the making a meal clip how she made it maybe an unintentional cross-linguistic connection visible for her grandchild Amaya? She probably didn't even realize it. This is a great example of leveraging strengths to build language that benefits English. All these examples we're sharing today are great demonstrations of building on assets, stretching language and having fun, and deepening the connections among family that we need now more than ever. Now I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Karen, who will share her experience working with a migrant education family liaison.
Gracias, Kelly. Hola, buenas noches y buenas tardes a todas y todos. Hello, everyone. My name's Karen Perez. I work at REL Northwest, and I'm coming to you from Beaverton, Oregon. I am also a bilingual, bicultural Latino mom, mitigating online learning for my daughters and working full-time from home. And I'm truly fortunate to live in a multi-generational home. That means I take care of my parents and they take care of us. You actually met my parents and my girls in the videos you just watched. And as you saw, my parents have, like Kelly said, as well, a rich cultural, linguistic, and historical wealth, which they can share with my daughters in Spanish. But when schooling moved into our home and online, we noticed that my parents' stress level increased as they could not help them with the technology or much of the homework. So the family caregiver activities have been a low stress way for them to engage with my daughters and share their cultural and strengthen their relationship really through play, all in our home language. So they are still building academic language and vocabulary, and most importantly, they're having fun. So now we'll hear from Alma Lopez, a migrant education family liaison. Alma shared these activities at a parent meeting, and parents in turn shared videos and clips of what they had done. So in the next videos, you'll hear a conversation with Alma and I about her experiences, and you'll also get to see children interviewing a special person and a family making a meal together. La última reunión que tuvieron, usted pudo introducir los FCAs a las familias, los proyectos.
Sí.
¿Puede contarme un poquito de eso, de experiencia que tuvo explicándoselo a las familias?
Sí, bueno, tuvimos la reunión de PAC y Kelly estuvo ahí con nosotros y les explicamos de qué se trataban las actividades. Explicamos dos de las actividades. Una es yo le llamo cocinando en familia, y la otra entrevistando una persona especial.
¿Y qué les contaron ellos de esa actividad? ¿Cómo les fue?
Pues una de las madres de familia que tuvo oportunidad de hablar, me dijeron que se habían divertido bastante haciendo eso. Nunca lo habían hecho anteriormente. Y de esa manera me dijeron, una de ellas me dijo que una niña me dijo que había conocido un poquito más a su tío, que fue al que entrevistaron.
Ah, qué bueno.
Esta es la foto de la entrevista. Y este es mi tío y este es yo, Esperanza.
Y mis hijos ayudando para cocinar los frijolitos y la carne en chile. Está en proceso. Vamos a hacer una carnita en chile. Voltea, Esperanza, volteada.
Hola, maestra.
Vamos a hacer ahora esa carnita en chile y frijolitos. Eso es lo que vamos a comer.
Sí, esa es una buena forma de que ellos tengan la experiencia de usar la actividad, como una recomendación de usted también y de las padres,
Sí, claro.
sería de que sería bueno usar la actividad dentro de la reunión con las familias para que así ellos tengan la experiencia de cómo es, cómo hacer las preguntas, practicar un poquito y hacer preguntas en el momento para después poder usarlas en casa.
Claro. Ajá. Yo he estado practicando esa actividad ya para ayudarles.
Sí,
Practicando. Porque yo
así.
tengo que masterizarlo primero para poderlo enseñar a los padres
Sí.
de
Y ese es
familia.
como, perdón, siga.
No, como dijo Kelly, todos estamos aprendiendo, todos estamos aprendiendo juntos.
Ujú. Y así como, especialmente cuando tenemos ese compromiso con nuestras comunidades y les estamos pidiendo a ellos que hagan algo, muchas veces yo también practico yo para poder explicarles a ellos mejor y saber qué parte fue más fácil, qué tal vez puede ser algo que sea un poquito complicado para ellos. Y también
Ujú.
ese modelo que usted está diciendo de primero hagámoslo juntos, lo sentimos más cómodo con la actividad y así es más probable que alguien lo use
Que alguien lo
en
use. Sí.
casa y lo puedan practicar porque se van a sentir mucho más cómodos.
Sí, claro que sí.
Muchas gracias por su tiempo y no le quiero tomar mucho de su tiempo tampoco.
No, de
Gracias.
nada, y gracias por la oportunidad de hacer estas actividades, porque en realidad necesitaba más ideas para trabajar con los padres de familia.
Okay. Ahora va mi turno, ¿right? Dice, ¿cuál es tu...
Sí. ¿Cuál es tu juego favorito?
En juego yo voy a decir dos cosas. Me gusta mucho cuando jugamos lotería toda la familia, me encanta, nos divertimos mucho, ¿verdad? Pasamos un buen tiempo todas las familias, que tratamos de hacerlo muy seguido. Y el otro juego es un deporte, mi deporte favorito es el fútbol. Me encanta el fútbol, me apasiona el fútbol. Yo no sé por qué tengo sangre futbolera, pero me gusta mucho el fútbol, soccer. ¿Quién hizo qué?
¿Quién hizo una gran diferencia en su vida?
¿Y por
qué?
Yo creo la que hizo una gran diferencia en mi vida fue mi abuela, la mamá de mi mamá. Esa abuelita se llamaba Faustina y ella nació en 1912.
It's exciting to see, just the vocabulary and the sharing of stories as the families come together just around play in this way. And as an educator, we know that the best way to try something new is to practice it first. So as you saw in the video, Alma and I both tried these activities at home before using them with others. And the more comfortable you feel with the activities, the easier it will be for you to share and model them with the families and communities that you work with. And introducing the activities as a warm-up in a parent meeting is a fantastic way for the families and caregivers to practice and build comfort. And we found that more families tried the activities at home when we provided opportunities for them to share how they use them. And sometimes offer and share their videos if they felt comfortable doing that. Allowing the families to co-facilitate and or lead an activity themselves as a warm-up is also a great way to build their leadership skills and to build community within your meetings and in your groups. So there's no wrong way to go about doing the activities that you and the families will have. You really have the freedom to make them your own. Somebody had asked in the Q&A section here in the chat, how long does it take? Well, it depends on how much time you have or how much time the families have. They can spend 10 to 15 minutes. They can, if they enjoyed the activity, they can make it longer, or they can start an activity and come back later to that same activity. So remember that these activities come in both English and Spanish. You can print out the activities and send them home as part of a homework packet, or as you can also share them through community organizations such as the libraries or the food bank or child care centers, after school programs, and possibly your family resource centers. So turning it back to all of you, what are your ideas? What do you already do with parents and families that help them develop language at home? And what ideas do you have for how you might share these activities with families and caregivers? So please go ahead and share your ideas in the chat. Yes, somebody asked, do families choose their activities? Yes, they can choose their activities. If you want, you can send them the link. I find oftentimes when I'm working with families, that I prefer to send one activity, because if I send them all to them, it becomes a little too overwhelming. So they can choose the activity, they can ask you for that, or you can choose as a group. Somebody's sharing that they have a family literacy class that works with families, and that these could be great resources to use in them. And that's what I found too. In working with Alma, we decided that this would be a great way to just share with the families. Like we said, practice them a little bit before we send them out, because that allows them to have a little bit more success. And they're actually fun games to play within your own meetings as well. I have somebody else sharing, saying that you can have the students really read the questions and share. You can do them in the weekly Zooms when you're sharing with their parents. And a lot of classroom teachers, somebody is sharing, Michelle sharing, that a lot of classroom teachers do community building and activities each week. So this would be great community building activities. And also somebody, John Paul was sharing that they could be activities that younger students can play with their older siblings. Jennifer sharing that, that they're starting a group for Spanish speaking families to connect via Zoom and offer their support. So these would be great resources for all those times. Rosario is asking if families have expressed any challenges in using the activities, and how would you navigate those? So when I was working with Alma, we realized that some of the families thought some of the vocabulary was a little bit more difficult, in the sense that they hadn't heard some of the vocabulary before. But what they also said was it was a time that they were able to look the words up in some cases. Other families called Alma and were like, what does this mean? Or how do I do this? So they actually reached back to Alma and asked for some questions about that. And then Alma mentioned that the more that they practiced it within their group, the easier it was for the family, and the vocabulary became more common language in some cases. I also wanted to mention that the activities, each person can approach it a different way. In my dad's case, he actually read it verbatim from the paper and it worked well. In my mom's case, she actually just took some notes about what she wanted to remember to ask when they were doing the activity, and that worked for her. So there's no wrong way to do the activities. So now, don't forget to look in your facilitator's guide for a few more tips on how to do these activities at home. And now let me hand it back to Heidi, who will share a little bit more about how you can access these materials.
So now you've gotten to know the family and caregiver activities. Please download them and let you know what you think. Let us know what you think. They're available in English and Spanish, as you heard, individually or in bulk. They're available from all three websites, but we'll put the link to the REL West website in the chat. And we would really love to hear how you have used them. Send us an email along with your tips and suggestions to relwest@wested.org, or some of the others that you'll see in the next slide. But now it's time for your questions. We've been collecting some of your questions in the chat, and we'll answer as many as we can. We'll also compile an FAQ list of questions that we don't get to, or actually all of them, and we'll send responses to everyone who was registered. We have had a couple that have already been answered, but one of the questions was whether or not the videos, whether or not the FCAs are in other languages. And we really would love to have had the resources to translate them into many languages. We were thankful that we could translate them into Spanish and English, but so obviously we think it's a great idea, but if you have the resources, you are welcome to translate them yourselves with the proper attributions developed by IES. And we would love to know how you've done and how they worked out. And who knows, maybe in the future we'll have some more funding that we can translate them additionally. So I think this question is addressing the one that I was asking earlier. If families get a little bit more guidance about what are some of the areas of development or learning that they're helping their children with. So Karen or Kelly or Lori, would you like to respond to this one? I guess I'll start with Karen.
Sure. So I would say yes. When you're doing the activities, there's as you're facilitating and modeling the activity for them, you can actually point out the areas that you're working on. Some activities may not include writing, but maybe the students like like to write or draw, and then you can actually have them incorporate those pieces. And depending on what grade level they're at, you can differentiate it in many different ways. Kelly or John Paul?
Sure, I'll just add that in the educator's guide, there's some more information about each one of the activities that will help that connect the recommendations. So they may be more specific in there. You might find a more specific answer in that educator's guide that accompanies the FCAs.
Thank you so much, folks. Heidi, there's another question about what if they don't know how to read. If I may respond to that question, one of my couple of my colleagues actually shared with me that recording yourself actually doing the activity and then showing it to families or caregivers as a resource can be very helpful. Another way of doing that is actually calling old school landline or a phone call, pick up the phone, and then having a conversation simultaneously while the family or caregiver is actually implementing the activity. So there are many different ways for folks to be able to access. Just keep in mind that you know your clientele better than we do, and the scaffolds provided in the educator's guide, there is an actual section that does provide supports in regards to disseminating and supporting families and caregivers in the home. Hopefully that helps a tiny bit.
One of the things we did have a lot of discussions on kids who don't know how to read, and so we did want to make sure that there were a lot of drawing activities for kids so they didn't have to write or read. Also, several of the activities are just perfect for kids not reading, like the guess my object or the cooking a meal. So for the kids' point of view, there's a lot of room to play with them with these activity guides.
Karen,
oh, go ahead.
I was just going to add on to the following. You might also want to think about, I'm sure that you've actually encountered this, but there's many different apps that are available that would help with translations. I know that there were several references in regards to, are these available in Tagalog or among or other languages? You might consider taking a look at the different apps that can help you with translations so that meets specifically the demographics that you're supporting. Sorry, Karen, you say something?
No, I was going to say I've used Screencastify to make videos of myself. Screencastify, it's free. At least I use the free version. And you can take a video of yourself doing the activity and send that to parents. I've also, I've seen, like John Paul, you said, just, doing that, sharing in the video with them, the activity is also like in any way is helpful as well too.
There was one question about how many activities would you give to parents at a time, and I think Karen mentioned targeting with one might be easier, and I agree with that. And I also might say what we did with Alma. I attended the meeting with her when she presented them. Is she gave them a choice of 2. She thought there would be 2 activities, and she allowed them to go off and to try them. Whichever one felt good to them. And as you could see in the video of the grandmother that was the interviewing activity. So it wasn't necessarily calling up an uncle and having a conversation over the phone, but it was more like 20 questions where they decided all on their own to cut the questions up and put them in a bowl in the middle of the living room. And that's how they were all sharing all those questions. So, you can see that there's lots and lots of options and opportunities. And like we say, just deepening those relationships within the family, as well as developing, their home language will definitely help them with their English.
In the educator's guide, the other thing that we have in there are some suggestions for how to customize the activities for your classroom. So looking at what your standards may be or something you may be working on in the classroom and sending home word lists along with the FCA for families to really be able to support what's happening in the classroom in a structured way. So you can tie this as closely to your classroom work as you want, or you can just send them home to be, an extra something that's just really that fun to do. and empower those. Somebody commented during the video how exciting it was to see how empowered the grandmother felt in working with her granddaughter.
And yes, honoring families' languages was really important to us. So there's a question, how do you help parents and caregivers understand how the FCAs are supporting language? That is the why behind the activities. Fun is fun, but these are really also for learning. And yes, definitely for that. John Paul, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. When we think about an asset-based approach, not only are we honoring languages, but we also have to communicate with families and caregivers that in their primary language and learning language, there are benefits and there are significant expectations that I can stretch my language with myself as well as with whom I'm interacting with. So one, I would highly recommend communicating the power and the benefits of language, as well as two, acknowledging that languages that they speak at home bring cultural assets and we can capitalize on that. One way to do that is also the types of books and texts that we're using in our classrooms. Are we showing our students in the text, and in the text, do they see themselves as cultural assets? So communicating that with parents and then just following up and supporting the fact that talk, read, sing, chant. In the Pacific region, chanting, our oral languages are so powerful. And I think we need to continue with that, and our families and caregivers would benefit hearing that over and over again. So taking an asset-based approach.
And Karen, do you want to add anything?
I would, oh, sorry.
Oh, Kelly,
Kelly.
would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I would just add that remember that on the back of each one of these activities, or the second page, there's a whole section on language supports. And so those are very specific things that families can do that connect directly with the activity. And, you know, sometimes, like I said earlier, there's a challenge, there's a language challenge on there as well. So we really we're focusing on really stretching that language, like stretching their language to get them to the next level, to create experiences where they're having opportunities to build the language in their home language as well as in English, if that's accessible to them.
I've always heard, you know, students, I was a primary elementary teacher in my past life, and, you know, kids only learn to read once. And the more oral language practice that they have, the more vocabulary they build, and that strengthens their readiness to read. And so, like John Paul was saying, singing, poems, chanting, dancing around, and putting words to movements is great. And in these activities, you know, adding some drawing, some writing of words have been included as well. So I think I also wanted to mention how powerful it was for me to see my parents building a stronger relationship with my daughters through language and through play at a time when everybody's so stressed with what's happening around with COVID and not being able to interact with other people. These are activities that, you know, when we did these activities, we were able to do them across Zoom, not only and build relationships through Zoom by playing games as well.
And folks, if I can just go ahead and add, at the end of the webinar, there is a slide with the references, and the national academies that we referenced that supports the need of developing language, L1 and L2, is also cited in chapter 3 and chapter 5. I know we're educators, and I know I'm going to geek out from this, but keep in mind that oral language development starts with language at the home. And Brian, in the chat, I just want to reiterate, it does develop and strengthen. What we have to do is communicate that to our families and caregivers through multiple modalities. So thank you so much for identifying with that, Brian.
Also with Tishana, who did note that research supports that proficiency, and the language 1 contributes to language 2 proficiency. And that is valuable information for parents and caregivers. So that went to all panelists. I just wanted to make sure that everybody was able to gain value from Shanna's comment.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Heidi.
So if you'd like to learn more about the RELs and the free resources, I don't know that we stress that very much, but these are all free. And we have many more free resources at the RELs. You can contact us at the email addresses or go to our websites. This slide will also be included in the packet you'll receive directly after the webinar. And then next slide. So if you're interested, if you want to geek out, as John Paul says, here are the references that he referred to in his section. And that will also be in the slides. And thank you again for joining us. We hope to hear from you soon.